Thrustmaster's teamed up with Sparco to make what might be the ultimate mid-level sim racing wheel. It's got the looks, it's got the power, it's got great button placement, and it comes with a pedal set. It stands at the top of the Thrustmaster lineup with the TSPC and the TGT. It's got 6 Newton meters of force and a beautiful Sparco 310 replica wheel. It really might be the best mid-level racing wheel out there. Or is it? Stay tuned and let's find out. The TSXW, the TSPC, the TGT, they're undoubtedly the best wheel and pedal package you can get in new condition at the price point of $800 or less. The base provides the strength needed to feel your car on the road, and the build quality matches that price point. The question, of course, being, is it worth the step up from entry level to go to the TSXW? Let's find out. I've been addicted to racing games for the better half of 25 years now, owning a wheel on occasion, but over the last 4 years I've really started to dabble with sim racing. And my first rig was intentionally built just for the PS4. I built it at home, it was made of wood, but I never had the feeling of immersion that I really wanted. So it's now been 6 months since I built my second rig, which was completely for PC, and I could say now I'm not dabbling anymore. I've gotten in pretty deep. You might even say that 2 additional monitors, apps like SimHub, tunable feedback from the Butt Kicker Gamer 2 are the reason that I've gotten addicted to sim racing. And you're probably right, but there might be some other factors at play here. The first 2 times I built a rig, I went with Logitech wheels initially. The first was the Logitech G29, the second was the Logitech G920. They're both by reputation great wheels, but lack the ability to provide realism in terms of how the wheel feels in your hand and the feedback it provides. The TSXW, totally different story. From the first time I drove it, the experience was more real and immersive than any gear-driven wheel I could imagine touching. You no longer feel as if you're playing with a toy. It's like that disconnect between you and the car kind of fades away. You can feel every slip, bump, pedal as real as you can imagine. And yes, it really is a dramatic improvement over the Logitech wheels. But let's dive into the mechanics a little bit and see if it's worth the upgrade. The TSXW is no doubt a high-powered belt-driven wheel. With a 40-watt brushless motor and a dual pulley system, it's sure to put your strength to the test. The base is powered by a 400-watt power supply and a turbo designed to add function and decor to your rig. All this is supplying 6 Newton meters of force. It has a full 1,080 degrees of rotation. So all this power means the TSXW is going to go toe-to-toe with any belt-driven wheel on the market. I bet you're starting to wonder why you haven't ordered it already. But don't click that checkout button yet, there's still a lot to cover. So let's take a minute to talk about the design. The enclosure sports racing red paint, and it's definitely easy on the eyes. The bulky stature of the servo base keeps it firmly mounted anywhere you bolt it, and it reminds you that it's there to be used and abused. At the front of it all, you'll find your hands rest comfortably on a beautiful Alcantara wrapped Sparco 310 replica wheel. In between all that soft leather is a brushed metal mounting plate surrounded by carbon fiber enclosure and 10 conveniently placed buttons. While looks aren't everything, they certainly serve well in this wheel's case. So it's immersive, and it comes ready to drive. It's got the power, it's got the looks. So is it your next wheel? Let's look at a few other facts before we get too deep into that. One fact in particular, how does it handle? Racing in the TSXW to me is kind of like racing in a sports car for the first time after driving a basic daily driver every day. In your daily driver, the steering's kind of loose, the pedals are soft, the suspension shakes, it's not planted firmly on the ground. But in a track car or a sport car, you notice when you're driving it that you have a much more planted feeling. Your wheel is stiffer, your pedals are stiffer, the suspension just keeps you locked in. Basically, the car becomes an extension of you while you're on the track. And the TSXW is kind of like that sports car. When you take the TSXW out and you start driving it, you really do feel the extension of the car. Even though you're playing on a screen, it doesn't quite feel like it anymore. And you also start to notice things like when you need to catch that spin, you're not missing it anymore because you're feeling some real detail through the wheel. You feel it so much so that you're able to achieve 7 degrees of slip angle. And really, like I said, you feel the tires and you feel connected to the car. It's a seamless feeling that makes it more real and it helps to blend you with the screen. It really is that monumentally impactful, but that's only if you tune it properly. You're definitely going to want to set up the wheel using the Thrustmaster software that comes with the drivers for it. And when you're setting it up, a few recommendations. Having max strength, both from the wheel and then consistent and periodic strength, is going to provide the detail you need on the track to be able to feel the tires when they start to lose traction. You're going to feel the bumps in the road. You're going to feel every little bit of detail that you need to feel to control that car. Spring rate I've found isn't really necessary to do anything with. I keep it at 0, and I've learned that if I change that at all, it doesn't feel as real immersive. Doesn't feel like I'm driving a real car so much. So in my opinion, there's no reason to really mess with spring. But the damper. This is one that I had to learn a critical lesson about because when I first started, I don't know what I thought damper was supposed to do, but I will tell you what it actually did is limit the detail of the car on the road. The damper will basically take away all that feedback you would normally get from the car, and it softens everything. So the higher you set the damper to, the less effective the feedback is going to be in telling you what's happening with the car. So my recommendation, keep it low. I personally have it at 6%. You might be able to go up to 10 or 15, but I found that starting at 15 and backing it down, I started to notice track times improving because I was able to read the car better. So definitely don't want to set dampering too high in the Thrustmaster app. And just like with any tuning, you always want to make small adjustments and only one adjustment at a time. The small single adjustments will help you to know what's actually working and what's not. And the same can be said for ecosystem changes, which happens to be what we're going to cover next. So once you've got a TSXW or TSPC or one of the higher end Thrustmaster wheels, you start to ask yourself, where do we go from here? There's plenty of options available for the Thrustmaster ecosystem, but there's very few of them that I would consider an upgrade. You do have options to change your wheels. They have Ferrari replicas, open wheel, there's even a Sparco rally wheel. Thrustmaster also offers load cell pedals, which I did opt to go with. And they are a big improvement over the T3 PA pedals that come with the TSXW. But the problem, unfortunately, is that that's pretty much the extent of the progression when you get into the Thrustmaster ecosystem. When you get the TSPC, TSXW, the TGT, you're already at the top. Should you choose to make a final leap to a direct drive wheel, You're not going to find that option in a Thrustmaster lineup. This means that you pretty much need to start all over from scratch if you go to a direct drive wheel. You're going to need another wheel. You're most likely, well, some Thrustmaster pedals will work with other wheels. Particularly the TLCM pedals have a USB option. But you're most likely going to want to stay in the ecosystem, or you're going to upgrade pedals anyways. So ultimately, you're not starting out with the ecosystem that you're going to upgrade through if you start with Thrustmaster, because you're going to hit that wall. So this is where the Thrustmaster really falls short. They haven't evolved beyond the point of mid-level racing wheels. So you have to ask yourself, what competition is there for mid-level racing wheels? The truth is, the line between mid-level and higher level is starting to fade even more. Up until recently, the top-of-the-line Thrustmaster gear was competing with Fanatec CSL Elite and the Club Sport bases, which were quite comparable in terms of performance and the build quality and the strength the wheel could provide. But like I said before, the advantage of Fanatec is you can basically drop a direct drive wheel right into the ecosystem, and you don't have to buy anything else if you started there. But now Fanatec's changed the game even more and has introduced the CSL DD wheel, or wheel base. Suddenly we're no longer comparing apples to apples. The mini DD wheelbase from Fanatec with a boost kit, wheel, pedals, put you right around $1,000. So pretty much the same as a TSXW with the TLCM load cell pedals. But the difference is that Fanatec DD wheel is going to produce 8 Newton meters of force versus the 6 you're going to get with the Thrustmaster. But the problem is the price does continue to climb when you get into the Fanatec world, because now you're looking at $400 a pop for any interchangeable wheels you want, and you might want a clutch and a load cell pedal to go with the basic set. So all that's going to cost you, it's going to go well over $1,000 in the end, but initial investment is still very comparable. So with the introduction of the DD wheel, or the CSL DD, Fanatec has discontinued all their belt-driven wheels, making direct drive the direct competition for Thrustmaster at this point. This could mean good things for Thrustmaster users, since competition tends to drive that progression. But with all that information, is TSXW still really worthy of an upgrade? Before we know that, let's take a minute to talk about durability. The final factor in determining if the wheel's worthy of being upgraded to is the durability. We have to determine if the wheel will hold up through all the abuse that it's going to endure while you're racing with it. Much like a real race car, it's no good if the wheel's sitting in the shop all the time or constantly having to be sent back to Thrustmaster to be repaired. So we want to know that we're going to get something solid, something durable that we can rely on. So, as somebody who's practiced about as much as I've raced, I can honestly say the wheels stood up for 2,000 plus laps in official races, and probably a few hundred hours of practice at this point. So at this time, there is no sign whatsoever of belts becoming loose, no wear on the wheel, no other mechanical issues. Even the removable wheel itself is firmly attached to the base exactly the same way as the day I installed it. The wheel continues to operate with the same force and detail as it's always had. Now, with all that considered, we can actually come up with a conclusion on whether this is the right upgrade wheel for you. Alright guys, so having covered the high end and the low end of sim racing wheels, I'm sure you have a good idea of where the TSPC, TSXW, and the TGT fit into the sim racing market. The TSXW definitely provides immersion, style, performance, and it's all at a reasonable price. It is a thrill to race with, and it far exceeds the entry-level wheels in terms of feedback and strength. It's definitely not a wheel you're going to want to upgrade too quickly, and it's not a wheel you're going to get bored with right out the gate. I would highly recommend, though, upgrading the pedals, because the T3PAs just don't do the wheel justice, and they're just not going to cut it in the long run. So if mid-level racing wheel is your goal, and that's where you're going to want to stay, the TSXW is definitely a great option. But it should be the consistency, it should be the standard for sim racing wheels, not the mid-level. When I first got into sim racing, this is what I expected the wheel to feel like. And I feel like when you get into those lower levels, you just don't get that. So when I switched back to a lower level racing wheel, it's more like peeking into the window of sim racing than it is actually getting in the car and driving it. So the high-end belt drive is really night and day from what those entry-level wheels feel like. But I will say, if upgrading and going to a direct drive is on your bucket list, then the TSXW is not the wheel for you. You're gonna have to do a full ecosystem swap. And that's why we can only hope that in the near future, Thrustmaster will decide to get on board with their own direct drive wheel and decide to compete with Fanatec. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to hold on to some of my ecosystem when I upgrade to a direct drive wheelbase. I hope this video has helped you guys make your decision with your upgrade. Like I said in the beginning, if you enjoyed the content, if you want to see more of it, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're curious about the rig build with the roof, I'm going to link that in the end. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. Deuces.